Just when I thought I would have a nice quiet Christmas edition for this year, the big changes kept rolling in. A new Ministerial Direction, MD111, was placed into operation this week, governing how student visa applications are going to be processed by the Immigration Department from now on. This direction replaced the dreaded Direction 107, which we have spoken about numerous times.
Hey, I got a new pair of shoes. You want to see them?
I guess so.
MD111 applies to new student visa applications lodged offshore, including those still waiting to be processed. It does not apply to onshore student visa applications, but we find in general that many people are waiting for a long time for these to be finalised. Tonight we will be examining this direction and the significant impacts it will have on the education industry. MD111 directs Immigration Department case officers to keep an eye on each education provider's international student visa quota and then slow down the processing of student visa applications when these quotas are getting close to being reached. In reality, this direction is a student visa cap law by stealth. It has been designed so the government could circumnavigate the will of the people. Remember that place called Parliament House, where bills are put forward, laws are considered on merit, examined by Senate inquiries, and voted on in true democratic fashion. The student visa cap legislation did not pass the will of the people, but strangely, here it is, a de facto law staring us in the face where the minister believes he has the power to decide, not the parliament. On a somewhat humorous side, it seems that Tony Burke, the actual immigration minister, did not want to take responsibility for this direction himself and delegated his assistant to sign off on it. Imagine that, possibly one of the most controversial and influential ministerial directions ever tabled, but still you nominate the Assistant Minister for Citizenship and Multiculturalism, not even the Assistant Immigration Minister, to sign it off. It seems like someone is looking for plausible deniability if the poo hits the fan. What is concerning though is that the whole Labor Party seemed very pleased with themselves during the week when they used this backdoor approach to govern Australia. Energy Minister Chris Bowen was a prime example of this Cheshire cat smugness of being able to stick it to the political opposition parties for blocking the actual student cap legislation.
The Department of Home Affairs has been directed by the federal government to slow down the processing of visa applications for international students.
The government tried to legislate a more sensible approach to international education. The opposition, who pretends to care about immigration numbers, voted against that. So, of course, ministers and the government have to consider other ways of getting it done. This ministerial direction is another way of getting this done.
But did you notice that beginning sentence? Let's play it again.
The government tried to legislate a more sensible approach to international education.
The government tried to legislate a more sensible approach. Well, that about sums it up, doesn't it? They tried the more sensible approach going through Parliament and doing the right thing. But hell, that didn't work, so let's take the less sensible approach. But how exactly less sensible is it? Many would argue that it's not sensible at all. I'm unsure if the Energy Minister knew what he was admitting to when he made that remark. Whatever his intentions though, it is a clear admission to the world, which is watching Australia very closely, that MD111 is a less sensible approach to international education. News of this new direction quickly spread worldwide and was painted quite negatively by other countries' media. India focused on the apparent consequences that its nationals will be the hardest hit by these changes. Japan focused on the government's efforts to bypass the parliament by creating a backdoor approach, and Singapore focused on the legal workaround to cap numbers. Although this so-called legal workaround may not be as legal as everyone thinks, as an article pointed out in The Australian yesterday. And there will be much more discussion on this possible illegality. The new MD111 has two processing pathways, high and standard. High Priority 1 enables case officers to process applications up to 80% of the quotas allocated for each educational provider. For example, if a school is allocated 100 places for the year, when 80 student visas are granted, the processing goes down into slow mode, down to Standard Priority 2. However, here's the catch. Case officers are not allowed to grant education providers students over their yearly allocated quota. So what does that mean? Well, it can only result in one of two possibilities. All of those applications are still waiting, going into a non-processing holding pattern. The remaining quota will be selected, and then the rest will have to wait until next year, or they will be just refused, which is more the likely scenario. The genuine student test will be rolled out as the tool used for these refusals, because remember, the GS can be used to refuse anyone. So will prospective overseas students even want to risk their applications being delayed and then refused? Remember, being refused an Australian visa impacts applications to other countries, so why risk choosing Australia? Will the government refund those who end up in the standard go-slow processing? How will people even know they are in the go-slow queue and have to wait possibly to next year? These are the important issues why the legislation was not passed in the first place, because as the opposition leader in Australia, Peter Dutton, put it,
it's a dog's breakfast, let's be honest about it.
Now, there are special exemptions from facing this potential slow-motion processing prison. There is a very special education provider where the students who apply to go there will never be placed into a holding pattern processing freeze. I'll give you a hint. It's government owned and run, starting with a T. Yes, that's right. TAFE gets the Golden Buzzer Award, while most other providers wonder how to stay out of bankruptcy. But TAFE is not alone. Here are the other exempted privileged. School students, subsequent entrants where the applicant is a minor, non-award students including short-term exchange students, standalone ELICOS students, students enrolled in pilot training courses, students in postgraduate research courses, foreign affairs and defence students sponsored by the Australian Government, students from the Pacific and Timor-Leste, students enrolled in the transnational education arrangements. Now, the quotas for each education provider can be found in the Education Department's indicative allocations. There is a list of higher education and vocational providers. For example, the Australian National University has been allocated 3,400 places. Bond University on the Gold Coast has just 360 places, and Avondale University has just 20. Yes, just 20 students. Of course, all of this devastation to the education sector in Australia is so unnecessary. Many academics are calling for a reality check, as ANU demographer Liz Allen was on the ABC's AM program during the week.
If we were to consider a more broader window of time, taking into account the fact that we had closed borders, we would see that we're not tracking as this out of control, bursting at the seams immigration system.
ANU demographer Liz Allen says the MyEFO figures are an accounting quirk and don't take into account the mass exodus of people from Australia during the pandemic.
We had net overseas migration of close to negative 90,000 people during the peak of COVID. Those people brought forward their departure dates, meaning they weren't in the population to offset any incoming people.
Now, when the Liberals were in power, yes, they were far from perfect. Still, they nearly always brought in grandfather clauses to ensure changes would not impact upon international students who had already chosen Australia to study in. They would have let people over 35 get their graduate visas if they had already started their studies in Australia. They would have honoured the longer graduate visas for those who chose those expensive listed courses, and they would not have applied this direction MD111 to students who had already lodged their student visas. Because to do otherwise leaves Australia with the reputation of being scammers. We set up baits to lure students in, then slam the doors shut in their faces and say thanks for your money, but you are not getting what we promised. No private company in Australia would get away with that. But here's the problem. We are governed by people without business experience. You can't expect trust and take money from consumers if you are not dependable, not consistent, and worse still, not honest. Sorry that it was not great news before Christmas, but we can only analyse it as it's released. Try to have a merry one anyway, and from all of us here in the office, we wish you the best holiday season and a happy new year ahead. Next week we will have a light-hearted video to cheer in the new year. As always, take care out there and I will see you next time, so bye for now.